Welcome to the business end. Today we're joined by someone who's lived the game in more environments, systems and cultures than most coaches ever experienced. Glenn Delaney grew up in New Zealand, went overseas at 19 to play in Japan and built a professional rugby career in France with Narbonne, in England with Nottingham and London Irish, and across multiple competitions. But it's his coaching career that really sets him apart. He transformed Nottingham into a fully professional outfit. He led London Irish, guided Canterbury to a Mitre 10 Premiership title, and played a key role in the Highlanders' Super Rugby campaigns. Then came Wales, where he stepped up as a head coach of Scarlets in the Pro 14, one of the most culturally unique environments in world rugby. Today, he's the head coach of the Mitsubishi Dynamos in Japan Rugby League 1, a league growing at an incredible pace, where its blend of clarity, culture design and adaptability has helped deliver statement wins against some of Japan's top teams. Across every chapter, Glenn has built a reputation as a coach who designs culture deliberately, communicates with clarity and gives people the license to play with standards that never drop. Glenn, the pressure is on now. Welcome to the business end.
It's great to see you. Thank you very much. It's a very kind introduction. It's humbling when you hear that, but I appreciate the kind words. Thank you.
Welcome, Glenn. Deserved. Yeah, it's well deserved, Glenn, but we're not going to let you off just for a nice intro. So on with the first.
So look, Glenn, you left New Zealand at 19 to play in Japan. I mean, that's a big move, a move most players wouldn't consider at that age. And when you look back, what pushed you to make that leap so early in your life and career, and how did that opportunity present itself?
Yeah, it was the best decision I've ever made, and I can say that retrospectively. But the year before that, I'd actually gone to Leicester and played at Leicester Tigers for a season as an 18-year-old on a scholarship.
Wow.
So I had a little bit of a travel bug in me already. Now, if I hadn't have gone to Japan, I think I probably would have gone back to the UK in any case, because I loved it. Loved the rugby there. Quite different from New Zealand, but very physical. But the Japanese thing just appeared, and the market in Japan was growing, so it's corporate in terms of the structure of rugby. So you worked for a company, they employed you, you played for their team. So the big branded companies like a Toshiba or or Sanyo, as it was in the day, Panasonic, they had rugby teams as part of the company structure. So young Japanese lads would leave university, come to the company who played in the rugby team at uni, get a job, work in the company for life, which tends to be the way it worked here, and play for the team. And they were allowed to have 2 foreign players in each side. So this company called Toyoko Kensetsu, was a construction company in Yokohama, were looking for a young lock to come. And they already had a guy on their team from Canterbury, and he just spoke to a few people and just rang me up and said, "Oh, look, would you be interested in having a look at this?" And I was like, okay. And the more we talked about it, I thought, this just sounds like a load of fun and something good to do and a bit of a different sort of experience and challenge. And I thought, well, why not? And from that point on, I've sort of just kept seeing the world through rugby, and it's been the best thing I've ever done.
What an amazing opportunity, and so culturally different as well, I imagine. I mean, how was that as a 19-year-old? The language, the different signs, for directions, and the team, the style of rugby. I mean, what was that like?
Completely different. You're right. So firstly, you start with culture, and Japan culture is amazing. It's very different from what I knew in New Zealand. The food, completely different. It took me like a year before I could eat sushi, and now I love after I love it. But I was raised on meat and 3 veg.
Yeah.
That was where I was coming from. Mum was from a farming family, and dad was from a long linear Irish family. So that was how we rolled. But going to Japan, everything was completely different. And the language thing was probably the big thing, really, because I was living in a company dormitory where no one spoke English, and we had no translators at training, and you had to learn the language to get by, or learn enough of it to get by. So that was really the making of you, was how much of the language you could understand and get involved to take on board. And that gave you the best chance of having a really good time.
How long were you there for in that initial stint?
I did 3.5 years the first time. So I think I was 19 and then left probably about 23, 24,
Okay.
something around there. So yeah, it was a decent period of time. And I guess it's like one thing. I always intended to go back to Christchurch to go to Canterbury because I wanted to play for Canterbury, and I ended up going back in 97 and playing a club season then. And that was sort of the next part of the playing thing. But once you sort of got into it in Japan,
Mm-hmm.
it was very easy to stay because, you got looked after really well. They were great people. They're very loyal,
Mm-hmm.
and you just, as long as you did your job and did your best, then you were looked after.
Excellent.
So when you move, obviously you play rugby in New Zealand, England, Japan, Wales. What's the single behaviour when you move, when the environment is changing all around you? What makes you reset quickly?
Well, there's a couple of, so one of my best mates is a Japanese lad who named Kaz, who I met him when I was here in Japan at 19. He was raised in Australia, so he speaks fluent Australian English, Australian, but he's Japanese. But he is Japanese, and I was having this chat with him not too long ago about why don't people learn to speak the language now, and it's not necessarily as easy as it perhaps was when we were fully immersed. And the sort of thing we talked about as being bicultural is probably better than being bilingual. And I think the cultural element, first thing is to immerse yourself in who are these people, why are they here, how do they do it? Because I think if you go in and try and impose yourself on someone else, I think no one's going to reflect well on that. None of us would, at London Irish or in England or anywhere. If someone's coming and saying, I think you should do it this way, I think you've got to go in and try and understand just how they do it, because that might just be brilliant, might be the best way you've ever found it. And I think that for me is the first lesson, is let's go in and find out who these people are, and I'm a guest, so let's do it their way.
How would you approach that? I mean, you've obviously been in so many different environments. Is it just sit back and observe? I mean, do you have a playbook? Do you in terms of immersing yourself? How do you attack that?
I think with rugby it's not too hard to do it, because you'll always know someone that you can talk to get a bit of advice or a steer of how somewhere works. But being a rugby tragic, you kind of know how the game looks in different places, and sort of maybe a little bit about how they play, or what's important, what's their DNA, that sort of thing. So that gives you a bit of a steer as to what it will be. But certainly the first thing is to meet the people. And I think probably the one thing I'll never forget this is when I took over at the Scarlets as the head coach, the first person who rang me was Phil Bennett, and I stood up. I had this chat with Phil, and what an amazing man. I got off the phone to him, rung my dad, because my dad, he was a massive fan of rugby. I said, "You're not going to believe this. Phil Bennett's just rung me." He goes, "You really?" And then when I left the Scarlets, the last person who spoke to me as I was going over the bridge was Phil Bennett.
Wow.
And that was sort of meant everything to me, just that he took the time to make both of those calls at different ends of the journey. And I think the people are always the thing. If you get to meet the people, you'll understand why it's important to them. And then I think you can apply a bit of, why should that be important to me? Well, if it's important to them, it's important to me. So let me go down their path.
Great advice.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. We talk about that with leadership in business. If they come in, a new CEO, the best thing to do is listen and understand the people before you give out directions or be directive on what you do.
Totally.
Yeah.
Two ears, one mouth. Let's use them in that order, because if you want to learn, you've got to spend time absorbing knowledge.
Yeah.
And you don't learn anything by telling everyone how to do stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you speak Japanese? Are you fluent in Japanese now?
I wouldn't say I'm fluent. I can get by. I'm okay.
That's good.
I wouldn't say by any stretch I'm fluent, because every day I hear, I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
But it's a challenge. But I had a good foundation when I was here as a young fella.
Yeah.
And that's helped me a lot. So I'd use as much Japanese as I can. The one area where we've got amazing translators who work with us, phenomenal. And what their art is that they don't say the literal meaning; they give the what you're intending. So they don't literally translate the words. Here's the meaning. So when I need to be clear and concise, use the translator, because they can do it better than me. Otherwise, it might take me a minute to say something they can say in 15 seconds.
Yeah.
So there's times when it's time pressure and sensitive that I'm 100% using the translator. Socially, no problem. I played golf today with the lads for 4.5 hours, and we just chunted away and talked about how bad my golf was, which is always nice to hear that in another language. But yeah, the one thing about the language is that when you can speak enough of it, you can have a conversation around how someone is, how's their family, What are they up to? What did they do on the weekend? What are they interested in? You can build that little bit of relationship,
Yeah.
which in English speaking as a coach player, you'll automatically build that because you can have the conversation. Whereas if you don't have to use the translator, it's pretty quick. You can get to know people a lot better.
Yeah. Is the banter just as fierce in Japan as it is in England?
It's brutal, and quite hierarchical as well. So the kohai senpai relationship. So everyone's got a senpai, their senior, or kohai, their junior, and they come through schools and universities. So if you've gone to the same institution, you've already got the hierarchy set, and some of the senpai stuff down to the young kohais is really, they get put in their place. So
really,
and then you get the odd youngster that wants to sort of poke up a bit, and sometimes they do, and they might get away with it. But yeah, it's like any rugby team. The banter's the thing that keeps you going, and we're continually trying to find a way to have a laugh and sort of release tension. And there's always a lot of stress in a game when if things don't go right or they do, you sort of want to work them along that sort of paradigm of stress release to learn, and the humour stuff has always been part of that I've enjoyed, and no different here. They're full of humour, that's for sure.
brilliant.
Yeah, and you got an emergency exit excuse. So I don't understand what you're saying.
Don't understand. Yeah, no.
Yeah, don't understand.
Not sure what you're saying, but probably don't like it.
Very good. So, Glenn, you've often described culture as a petri dish. The environment determines the behaviour. What were the small daily standards you focused on first when taking over teams like Canterbury, Scarlets, Dynamos, etc.?
Yeah, the first thing I've always looked at is the history, the DNA. Who is this place? What have they got? What have they done? Some of that history is pretty clear. You look at the history of, say, Canterbury, it's pretty clear, well documented. The Scarlets, phenomenal history. The Highlanders, a great history for doing things a different way. With the Dynamos, the history thing was a piece we've worked really, really hard on. We've looked at the history of the organisation because Mitsubishi is a massive organisation in Japan. The bits that you probably see externally are not the massive parts of what we do, but defence contracting is enormous for us. But the company started like over 150 years ago. So we've tapped into that history to give us a reason why we've got the shirt on, because with a Canterbury, it's pretty easy for me to, when I'm there to talk around Grizz Wiley and Fergie McCormick and the legends of the past, because they're so vivid. And the Scarlets, I mentioned Phil before, but you look at the legends that have come out of that place and the games they've played, beating the All Blacks 9-3, that sort of stuff's written into folklore. So it's quite easy to sort of get into that. Whereas with the Dynamos, we're sort of creating more history now because it's a team that's grown and got promoted. So we leant back into Mitsubishi and the stories behind how Yataro Iwasaki set it up 150 odd years ago out of the feudal system, and how it became the monolith that it is in Japanese business.
Fantastic.
So when you come into a new club, and you've got your ideas, and how do you turn ideas into something actual, so players actually live those ideas rather than just slogans on the wall? How do you implement that?
Yeah, the one thing around trying to convince someone, you've got to have a vision of what you want it to be, and we've all got goals and ideals, but some of those goals aren't necessarily pure outcome. It could be environmental, it could be behaviour standards. So if you look at behaviours, values leading to an identity, those are the things. So if you want to have an identity of something, you've got to believe in something first, and then the way you behave has got to align to that belief, and that gives you sort of an identity that maybe people externally will put upon you, or you can feel yourself. So if you can deliver those things, then you've got the objective of where you're going to go. So then you can start to sort of tell a story or take people with you around ideas that you might have, because if you've built a common way of behaving because we believe in something, then I think it's a lot easier to do that. I think if you turn up anywhere and say, hey, by the way, now we're going to do this, and the guys in the room might go, I don't want to do that, it's not really part of me, you've sort of missed a trick. So I think you've got to build the relationships first before you can start trying to say, I'd like us to do that, because there's also got to be a reason why you want to. And actually, if you're talking to people in the room around an idea or something you want to do, you've got to be able to justify it to them, because they've got to implement it. Because the one thing about coaching is we don't cross the white line anymore. We sit in row 42 if you're thinking about just the game. So if you're trying to implement something, it's got to come from a deeper, I believe, cultural, behavioural, sort of values-based position.
So obviously, people might not know this about Glenn, but he did have a recruitment background. So I'm going to ask Glenn. The margins between like elite and good are very small now in professional rugby. So what would you say? I'm putting this in recruitment terms. What would be the softer skills that you think that you look for in a player that makes you want to like hire them, recruit them?
Yeah, that's the key. I think the one thing is having an open-minded ability to learn, because the thing I say about the game is that when we played the game, it's looks very different to how it looks now. And I think you blokes as props might have seen that sort of evolution of the scrum as a metaphor.
Yeah.
So 50 years ago, it was like last man in was the tight head, and we sort of bit of this, and slowly over time it just changed the biomechanics. Chrono brought a lot of biomechanical stuff in. Phil Keith Roach did some amazing stuff with England, and all of a sudden these scrum technicians turned it into the thing we have today. It's very different. So nothing's ever really static. So I think you've got to understand that that open-minded approach to learning and getting better is the one thing that's going to allow the player to flourish. Because if they are really closed-minded about this is how it is, this is it, then I don't think that evolution can continue.
So I mean, how do you, if you're like signing players, how do you find that information? Like,
well, the recruitment process is probably the most important detailed thing that we do, and I think that's an area and a space that's really evolved massively in the last 15 to 20 years. So when you're looking at recruiting a player, there's the sort of the measures you can see statistically. You can tell a lot about their production, so that takes care of that. But then you've got to look at the character, the personality. Who have they worked with? Who do they know? Where do you feel are the things that they can't do that can you improve those things, or can we cope with them? But a lot of the heavy detail around that sort of, because you're talking about the top sort of 1% of players in the world. So it's a very narrow band. Often it comes down to the personality in the person, because the talent level, there are some marquee talents. We know some of the guys you talk about are going, well, Anton Dupont, holy moly, he is some player. We know that. He's probably a great guy too, which just makes it sick, doesn't it? He's so talented. He's probably a great guy. So when you're looking at the players that are going to come into your environment, you know that you're going to work with these guys for a very intense period of time. So that character piece is actually incredibly important. How do they behave when they're under stress, pressure? Those are the things you really have to know.
Yeah, and you have to know yourself, I presume, as well. So who's going to fit with you?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, how many times
and
you guys played with coaches and perhaps you've clashed with them, but another coach you play better because you don't clash. Do you take that into account?
Yeah, 100%. And the style part of relationships, I think it's a people business, and there's a lot of similarities with recruitment in the commercial world.
Yeah,
because it is people. You're putting people together who you think, as an independent, those two people will probably work together well.
Yeah.
So how do you go about, what's your methodology for going about that process and finding whether that personality of the player is going to match you? Is that a conversation? Are you personally with them? Is that reflections from people that you know and trust? How do you attack that?
Both of those really, because you are in a fairly small gene pool. There's not hundreds of thousands of people in the marketplace. So that's sort of half a degree of separation. You're bound to know a coach that's worked with every player. You're bound to know players that have played with every player. So it's pretty easy to get on the phone and take some soundings from people that you know and trust. You meet with them, you eyeball them. I remember the other way happening when Dick Best signed me to play at London Irish. He eyeballed me for, I think, 5 minutes when no one said a word. It's like...
looking into
I can't say anything because you haven't seen us. So
yeah,
he was just looking into the depths of me to figure out whether I maybe would break. But the reality is you're meeting the person, absolutely, and you can do that. Like we're online now. There's forums and ways you can meet people, but the referencing is often a big part, because I think you can always look at the qualitative and the quantitative data. You can look at the stats and then you can qualify it with pictures. That's all available. What does the person train like? What are they like on a week to week? Is it like Shees, who would do captain's run only and not train for the rest of the week? Is that what you're going to get, or is it a guy who's every day on the grass working hard and no gripes, just gets about it? Those are things you really want to understand, because when you're bringing a culture together, if you bring one person in that perhaps draws the culture more towards them and it's not what you're looking for, you'll erode everything you've built.
No.
Yeah, and there's one thing that's really hard to like quantify, and that's like intent. Someone can make the same tackles or hit the same KPIs in business, but there's always someone that seems to get better results, and it's not luck. I'm sure it's just like intent. They want to do it, but yeah, it's fascinating.
No, totally agree.
So, Glenn, you've coached in all the tough competitions: Super Rugby, Pro 14, URC, Japan League One, Champ, Prem, ticked all those boxes. In high-pressure moments, what's the internal script and routine that helps you stay composed and keeps the group aligned?
It's hard sometimes. It really is. We're all passionate about what we do, and sometimes it's really hard. But I think when you come back to the longer-term perspective, I think that if you're looking at what you're doing about trying to get the team better, you might have fluctuations in some of the emotional stuff because we're all trying to perform. And I'm being careful. It's not about winning. We're trying to perform, because if your team performs well, how you've planned, they're going to put the odds in their favour. And I think the only time that you sort of get really truly disappointed is if you see a lack of effort, because you think that all your teams should have that desire to work hard and put the effort in. But yeah, no, it is sometimes difficult. But when you come back to the processes, it is a rugbyism using the word process, but there are things that we do on a continual basis each week to try and make sure that we can play the game the way we want to play. So when you look at the three sort of mantras of mindset, are we motivated the right way? The structures are the things we're trying to do together cohesive, and are they the right things? And then the skill set of, have we worked enough on our catch, pass, kick, tackle, footwork, line out, jump, lift, throw, all those nuts and bolts. For me, you tend to look along those three things. And if you've had a good performance, you'll find one of those things that really worked well. If you've had a poor performance, you'll find one of those things perhaps that didn't work well, and then you can work on it. So you're continually going through that. Same as in business, the plan, do, maybe replan or redo, and then you replan, and then you redo it again. So it's the same cycle that you would use in business.
And internally, I mean, it's inevitable with coaching teams or playing in teams that, you have that dip of bad form when things aren't going your way. Obviously you've got, as you spoke about there's methodology to get the team back on track, but sometimes that takes a little while. How do you personally cope with that pressure? Do you have a routine or a reset that you go to help diffuse and keep you focused?
Yeah, for me, I make it objective. So as an example, if you're going through a period where it's not going as well as you would like, you obviously start losing a bit of sleep. You start, because you care, and we all care. Then the only way you can really get yourself back into a healthy routine is to make it objective and find the reasons. And once you've found the reasons, then you can work on them, and away you go. And another way of dealing with that is theming and using metaphors to tell the story, because most of what we do, maybe 90% of what we do, is quite repetitive. The things we do may be done slightly differently, but the week tends to get fairly well set. So how can we make that fresh is maybe add a story to it. So one example of with Canterbury, this one was we played Wellington away at the end of what was called a storm week. We had 3 games in a week, so it's Saturday, Wednesday, Sunday week. Everyone had to do it. And we had the Ranfurly Shield. So the first 2 games were Shield games. So they were really doubly important because you don't want to lose the Shield. The third game was Wellington, who were in the Championship, not in the Premiership at that stage. So for us, it wasn't a game that had a double-edged sword on it. Yes, we won or lost. There could be an effect on our points. But if Wellington won, they couldn't catch us because they were in the different competition. And we had a really poor day. We got absolutely stuffed and, destroyed. And it was like, this is one of the worst. And we'd layered the theme of the LA Lakers three-peat, because we were going for a three-peat for the competition. And I think it was Portland they played away, and the Lakers had an absolute stinker and got stuffed. And I could just use that analogy of, we've just been to Portland, boys, and it's all right, happens to everyone. Scratched it off, on to the next one. And the metaphors are often a really good way of finding a way to cope with the highs and the lows, because you're talking about someone or a situation that's already happened. And for the Lakers, they end up winning the three-peat. So going to Portland and losing didn't matter. They still won it. So we could use that to sort of just go, we can move on from it, because Didn't worry them, didn't concern them. We're still on track.
Very good.
Do you use theming a lot in what you do?
Yeah.
Like most weeks, would you have a different theme?
Yeah, there'll be some way to sort of engage the mind as to a bit of focus and try and put a little bit more resonance on the week. It's a good way of having fun and enjoyment as well. So we'll have a lot of that. So we'll kick off our Monday. Everyone's in mini team shirts. So we have mini team competitions. We'll get a theme for the week up to say, hey, here's a story. I've used a lot of Mitsubishi ones like the Paris-Dakar race where Mitsubishi, the Pajero, dominated that for years. And the fact that one year we decided to make the 1 or 2 cars more than the trigger value of what a production car was and sold them in Japan so we could use it in the Paris-Dakar race to win it. So, that's a nice little story. So use those and away you go and just keep referring back to it over the course of the week. Yeah, so we do a lot of it because the boys like it, and this generation of players probably aren't the rugby tragics that we are, that probably don't watch every game going and just know everything about it. They've got other interests, and we're trying to keep them enthused and energized, and telling stories and using theming for metaphors and a way of explaining things we're doing actually helps with how they learn too, I think. So, yeah, we use it a lot.
Yeah, I don't think. Do you think, in your opinion, corporates could do a lot more of this? Because I don't think many do it. Theming.
They could do. I think there's the monotony of, and I use monotony in the nicest way because we've all got to go to work and perform our tasks and work with other people and the like. But I think it's probably something that could definitely be adapted to it. And, a happy, enjoyable workplace where there's something going on that people are talking about that's a bit different, and it just brings energy. And, the one thing for us is that, and you guys know this, being professional rugby players, is if you get Monday right, you've got a chance to nail Tuesday. And then if your Wednesday's your day off, you've got to get your recovery right from that so that you can nail Thursday. And if you nail Thursday, your captain's run Friday might be all right. But then if you nail captain's run, you've got a really good chance for Saturday. So it's just that day-to-day continual sort of improvement that everything builds on the next day. So we can't miss a day. And actually, energy is a massive part of how people feel about taking on information and learning and interacting and being confident with calling and assertive and feeling good about yourself is actually a great way to work. So I think there's probably things about maybe more traditional office-based work or working in teams, because there's teams working in all sorts of environments where a bit of fun and enjoyment actually brings the best out of a day.
Yeah, no, totally agree with that. In terms of leadership, you're known as basically player first, which is basically giving players the freedom to play, obviously within structure. But I think you've said somewhere that that's a superpower in pressure environments. I mean, how would you describe that? Why would you say it's a superpower?
Well, the thing about the games and the big games, that they need individuals to step up and to create something or make something. And I think you can use the other analogy of Moneyball, where it's statistically based to put yourself in the best position to have a go at something, but that won't necessarily win you a title. In those moments of a final, I think when you look at players that are competing in those moments, and you say Roger Federer at Wimbledon, I mean, how many times he won it? He was just special enough that he had that little bit of X factor to win the game in the big moments. And I think that's why you've got to have the holistic view. Yes, it's player, but it's probably even the person before the player. That if the person's feeling great, the player feels great, the player can perform, because you're wanting them to be free and coaching sort of skill set talk. You want them to be unconsciously competent, that they are literally able to take the information and react with their skills to execute. And so when you think about those players that we talk about, he's got so much time, and it's just so much time on his hands, he can do anything. It's because they're really free and they're taking on the information and reacting straight away, rather than 2 or 3 seconds later, which would be consciously competent, where they would go, I should have done that. So you want them to be free in that moment. And the very best players, they're always free.
I mean, how do you deal with pressure environments as a leader, a coach?
It's quite addictive. I think I've always been, it's sort of a perverse existence, I suppose, because we have periods where you're in the off season, obviously the pressure's low, but you're building. But then when you get into the competition phase, there's a huge amount of pressure, and expectation. And I think it's a great question. I've never answered this question before, but I guess because you understand and you've been through it enough times, you can kind of get where the real pressure points are and where you can take a little break from here, but over the course of the 4 months, there's pressure on the whole time because you're continually trying to help a team be at its absolute best to achieve the objectives, not only of the players, the management group, the off-field staff, but also in our case, the parent organisation. Everyone wants great outcomes. So you've got to continually live under that pressure to achieve it. But yeah, it is a funny way to live. I will be honest, but I've known no different. So I guess I've gotten used to the annual sort of fluctuations of an off season, a period of holiday, and then we're up here, and you're just immersed in it.
Yeah.
So presumably, in getting the most out of your team, your staff, you're building relationships with those individuals which you've touched upon. Do you have a way that you go about that? Is that structured or just something you find naturally in terms of connecting with people?
The connections, it's the most important thing I do every day is connect with every single person in the department. So we got 90 odd in our rugby department club, and I think my biggest job of every day is to go around and connect and say hello morning to every single person. And you find when you do that, some of them you move on pretty quick, but there might be some that is there a baby due, for example, or is there something going on, or have they been unwell, or is there a bit of stress? Is there something happening in their family? You might discover that. So it's a chance to have a bit of a chat about that and just check in and see whether or not there's some follow-ups needed. There's also, talking about stress in the environment, there's stress on players as well. If they're not quite performing well enough, or they're not getting selected, and they need to know why, and you need to spend time to give them things that they can work on. So, for me, I've talked to some of the younger coaches I've worked with. I say almost your work has to be done by the time you're at your desk, because that's time for people. So if you need to do some analysis or whatever, you can't sit at your desk really and hoe into it, because someone's going to want to maybe come and ask you a question. So for me, every morning, that's the most important thing, and that starts at, goodness gracious, about 6 and goes to whenever it goes to. And, you've got to make yourself available, because it is a people business. And I think perhaps coming back to the question around pressure, that's the bit I love the most about the pressure environment is the people. And I guess maybe a problem shared is a problem halved. So you can diffuse the pressure by having lots of conversations with people, I think.
Very good. So, obviously, as we've talked about, you've been all around the world. You've coached in some very, very different environments. Presumably, have to employ, different communication styles with language, culture, etc. How have you learned to deliver honest feedback without losing that personal connection?
Yeah, it's I've learned this the hard way as well, where I've early on I fudged it a few times. I thought I was doing the right thing, but it was the wrong thing. I think the analogy I use is you stab you in the chest. It'll hurt, but you know who's holding the knife and you know why they've put it there.
Yeah.
So that when you leave the room, there's real clarity in the message, and it's sort of an empathetic approach rather than a sympathetic approach. So I can share the fact, because I've been on the end of those conversations as well. I know what it feels like. Sometimes it doesn't make you feel very good, but at least if you've got the information, then you can start to use it to move forward. Again, I learned that the hard way early on, and that the other part of that is that being fair with everyone doesn't mean that everyone's treated the same, because everyone's circumstances and context is a bit different. That clarity message has got to be really clear. If whatever it's good, bad, or indifferent, they need to know what the message is and why. But the fairness for one individual might be slightly different from someone else's.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Tough love, basically. Sometimes you've got to do that, haven't you?
It can be.
Yeah.
It can be, but it can also be really quite caring and sort of empathetic, because the messages are, for the most part, if you've got the recruitment piece right, you've got great people in your environment, and they are good people, and they've all got value. So everyone wants to understand that when they go to work, they've got worth and purpose.
Yeah.
And actually they matter to people there. So for me today, having, playing in the golf day with the boys is a great chance for me to go and spend time with them without having to talk any rugby. And there's no conversations around selection, around skill, or to do that. It's just we're playing golf, and I'm the worst golfer there. So it's brilliant. It's a great day because we can care about each other and spend time with each other without having the rugby conversations. So that again builds a layer that, if you've got to have that conversation, there's a deeper level of trust in the message and the credibility that the message, that they can understand it. And you'd like to hope that through the way you've given it, that they can see that actually, if they can modify something, it'll help them get better, because ultimately we all still are trying to do that.
So have you ever made a decision where you've recruited someone and they had a wrong choice and then you have to fire them? Honest answer.
I
You
don't
can say
know.
absolutely no.
I don't think I have. I think there's, for whatever reason, there's players that have come for a season and it just hasn't worked out. But at the start, I think that the process was right. We got the right guy and away we went. I think probably the harder one around, something I did get wrong. There was a player I had who was a very good player, and he ended up playing the premiership. And we'd selected the team and decided that he wasn't going to play. And it just didn't sit well with me. And I went and told him, right, you're not playing for this. And he wasn't happy. And I was like, he's not happy, okay. And it just didn't sit right with me. And I sort of gone, so I actually changed my mind and went back and said, nah, yeah, I remember I went back and I said, I've made a mistake. I've got this wrong. And I actually, the other coaches, we'd made the decision collectively, and the other coaches were all really aligned that they thought he shouldn't play. And I was like, okay, it's a group decision, but it just didn't sit well with me. And I just put the head coach's hat back on and said, nah, I'm changing my mind. And I actually had to go and say to this guy, I've made a mistake. I'm changing my mind. I've listened to what you've said, actually made a lot of sense with me, and I'm going to back you back in and I'm going to change it around. And I learned a lot from doing that. And the one thing I learned from that was it's actually okay to say, I don't know, and I got it wrong as the coach. And I think that was the first time I did that.
And how did he perform at the weekend after you backed him?
I had a blinder.
There you go.
Right.
He went on and played in the premiership. I won't say his name, but he's a hell of a character. He's just a great guy.
Yeah.
He went on and had a really good career for one of the top premiership teams, and strength to strength. That ability to say I don't know, or I'm sorry, I got that wrong. I actually think that goes a long way with the playing group, that they can see that you are actually a person, and not a machine.
Yeah,
and actually, we all get things wrong.
For sure. That's great.
I think that's
Go on, Tommy.
brilliant. Yeah, sorry, I was going to say, I mean, like for leaders, they go into CEO positions and they think they're told, it's like almost in the rule book, you can't change. Once your decision's made, you've got to keep it.
Yeah.
And that's a great example. Sometimes you have to listen and change your opinion, change track. It's brilliant story.
Yeah,
So,
I don't think I've actually ever heard that being done, and I think you're 100% right. It's okay to be wrong. Was he shocked when you told him that? Because it's not a common situation, at least in my experience.
Oh, he was happy, pleased, and he was like, I'm gonna do this. And he played well and he was motivated. And it was just a moment where after that second conversation, I felt totally different from when we decided that we weren't going to play him. I was like, no, I actually feel sort of relieved and like, oh no, actually this feels right. And it's a funny thing, like feelings, like it feels right, so therefore it's right. And away we went. It was that was a really interesting moment for me, because up until that point it was gung ho, make decision. This is the direction. I had that sort of view that I had to be 100% right the whole time. And I reckon this is the period I had at Nottingham. It was great for me because I made a lot of mistakes and learnt from them, and actually had a lot of people around me, some really, really impressive people that were mentoring me, who gave me their time and taught me a huge amount. And the 8 years I spent at Nottingham was actually an incredible foundation for me.
I mean, I think that point, about changing a decision as a leader, people need to look into that a bit more. We'll certainly be looking at that as well and analysing it. On the show, we had Mark Evans, who I'm sure you know, and I asked him,
brilliant.
Fitzy asked him, what's the lead performance to you? And I was expecting, the usual, 100% working, listening, all this sort of stuff. the usual slogans. But what he actually said to me took me aback. He said leadership to me is alignment of all like the key stakeholders within the company, which I found like fascinating. And I think it's something that you talk about a lot. And I wanted to understand, what was your thought process to align key stakeholders within your organization, your team?
Yeah, it's so leadership is a really interesting thing, because we talk a lot about leadership, but we talk less about followership. Now, the reality is, if you have no followers, you have no leader. You're not leading anything. And I think the artistry of being a leader is understanding that you're probably not the expert in the room. The subject matter experts in their fields have got detailed expertise and knowledge, probably deeper. You'll have the breadth of it, but they've got the depth. And allowing them to lead from a first follower, second follower position, I think that makes the overall leader's job a lot easier. So when I talk about leadership and I think about it as it's a servitorship. So the leaders at the bottom, go on, I'm just here to fan the flames and get and keep the course, but I need the experts to be the experts. And I think to be a great leader, I think you've got to be comfortable that you're not the expert in everything in the room. That's why they're there. So let them sort of drive that area, make sure that they're working towards all the objectives. But, you know, being that server leader at the bottom, I think is the way, because, you know, no one following a vision means you're just one person chasing a dream.
How do you deal with people that are stepping out, stakeholders that step out of line with what the alignment is? How do you bring them back in?
I think you've got to understand why they're stepping out. You know, what's driving them to move outside of the agreed boundary, because when you may have a conversation where people might disagree, but you've got to get to the back end of it and disagree and commit. So we can disagree, but once we've decided as a group that, okay, we might not all agree, but this is the position we've got to take to get something achieved, then we've got to commit to it. And I think if that person's stepping outside after the point where everyone's committed, then I think that's a challenge, because that's someone trying to take it in a different direction for probably a different motive. So first of all, come back to make sure that you've got the people in a room, or whatever the motive, the tool is you're going to use to get your objective set, and then let's all go after it together and not misalign everything by drawing it slightly to one side or further to one side than it should be.
Oh, and once you've recognised, and I'm you know it's natural for this to happen at some point, with all the best intentions that somebody sort of pulls off. You've got a lot of strong personalities in sport and life. How do you get that ship and that individual back on board? What is your process for that?
It's deep conversations, and the conversations will take different forms. They're often influencing conversations, questions. You know, how are we looking here? Why are we doing this? Where are you heading on this area? Trying to leave room for them to articulate what they're saying. I think that the time is not so much anymore where it's, hey, stop that, do this. That might be something that you might be thinking, no, we need it here. So you might have a really clear idea from your position as a breadth leader on the depth. You know, the depth stream might be not quite where you would think it would be. So you've got an idea of that, but you can't just go and hit it head on and go, that's wrong, do this. I don't think that's the right way. I think you can ask questions for why, because they might have a really good reason why they're trying to do something. And you might go, shit, I like that. Let's keep going with that. That fits. And if you don't quite understand it, talk to the experts. And for the most part, they're going to stay on the boundaries. I think it's very rare now that you put a group of people or a team together and someone says, I'm going over here. I just think you probably wouldn't necessarily get that.
So, you're in Japan now. It's a fascinating place for me, looking in as an outsider. I love what's happening with the league, and the culture there just seems so fantastically different. What surprised you most about coaching in Japan, and how did you adapt your leadership style to be effective there?
It is incredibly different. So the bandwidth, firstly, if we look at the playing group, so we look at trying to play a rugby game here. So the bandwidth is far broader. So you've got probably half of the South African World Cup winning team are all playing in Japan. So you've got guys at that level. And then you've got guys who have just come out of university at the age of 22 who probably haven't got great experience and have played at a standard that it's so far away from a World Cup winner. You actually have those guys in the same team. You've got to find a way of making it all function. So it's far broader than any other competition I've ever coached. And then you put in the message clarity bit where you've got boys from the Pacific Islands, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, the UK. There's a few boys over here from the UK now, which is great. Japanese boys, obviously. And trying to get the clarity of message, things need to be translated to get clear. So you're roughly half the amount of time you can give a message. So you find yourself being overly sort of, I wouldn't use the word simple because that implies that it's sort of carefree. It's just really simplistic. But the reality, and also that they can't assimilate complicated information because they can. But you're almost wanting to use one sentence as opposed to 2 paragraphs. And trying to make that one sentence make really clear sense in a short period of time is the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you 2 questions. One of them will be off script, but when I say off script, I haven't included it in the questions we're going to ask. But the first question is basically, obviously, the behaviours. What's changed within the team? Because you had a lot of big wins this year, and what do you think has changed, if anything?
A lot of it, I think, is belief. No, massive shift. Belief.
Yeah,
100%. Believing that we were worthy, because as effectively a challenger team that got promoted 4 years ago now, it's quite hard to step up because in Japan the structure has in the first couple of years they had the bottom 3 teams went into relegation playoffs with the teams from the division below. So you were sort of in that yo-yo sort of period. So for us, we got up, stayed up. Then the next year we got above that block, which was a really big step because the established teams at the top, Panasonic, Kobe, Suntory, those teams have been in this league forever and are dominant, and their recruitment of the Japanese university players has been really, really strong. So they've been getting first pick. So they've always had great talent coming in. So for us as a challenger team, it was developing the belief that we actually deserve to be here. You know, we've had some wins. We're not as consistent as we would like to be. We're still striving for greater consistency. But knocking over those big teams is massive for us because it sort of reinforces to everyone, the players, the organisation, that we can do this. And I think that belief is sort of probably the biggest thing that we've grown. We had some good players come in. We had Curtly Aronson playing for us last year. He's pretty handy. He goes pretty good. Lukanya Arms joined us for this year. So we've managed over a period of time to be able to attract high-profile foreign players, which has been really, really good. They help a lot. And when you get the right guy, they just invest their time with the Japanese boys and help them upskill. So it's sort of a combination of those things. But I do genuinely think that belief and deservedness or feeling like you deserve to be here, I think that goes a long way.
And a very important question is what you see like the English leagues that you know as well, the clubs that went under during COVID, Wasps, London Irish, and the financial pressures that they seem to be under. What do you think that clubs, not just in England, but across the world, can learn from the Japanese structure of rugby? What do you think that they do right that perhaps the English clubs don't do?
Yeah, it is very different because the rugby teams here are corporately governed, so under a company umbrella. So it's a very different ownership structure. And we look at the beneficial owner model, which you have in the UK and I think some South African teams as well, where all of a sudden if one owner decides or has issues in business or whatever that force their hand and they've got to change, well then your club's at risk because if you look at the profit and loss models, there's very few clubs perhaps returning a profit or breaking even. We don't tend to have that problem here because we're working under a budget model where we are allowed to work within the realms of this. We're growing our supporter base, but the risk is not there of one person deciding I don't want to do this anymore. That's quite a significant difference. So we feel the governance of what we work under in our clubs is stronger, and certainly it spreads that burden.
It's fascinating, and it's such an interesting model. Are those budgets set internally by the company, or they put in place by the league? Is there a cap to what each team can do?
No, I think the companies decide how they go about it, and again, it is different here because we have guys that work for the company as employees, and we have professional players, and there's a mix. So there's guys who will come into Mitsubishi at the age of 22, and they'll work till the age of 65, and they might do the first 8-9 years as a rugby player. But for our guys today, well, I talked around the golf day earlier of the lads out. The company workers were all at the office. They were doing their jobs. So they're learning tasks and skills to contribute so that they're going to be in the organisation. So the budget models are not a direct comparison, because if you looked at just a professional team, well, it'd be different, because when you've got 20% of your players that are employed by the company and go to work on call it a Monday afternoon, a Wednesday full day, and a Friday afternoon, and then they do the training in the full-time program around that, then it is set up differently.
And I think it's so fascinating. That sort of leads on to another segment there in terms of transition. And you look, and we've all done it. Finished playing as professionals and then transitioned out. And look to see how we're going to make our way in the world. Is that coaching? Is that in business? Et cetera, et cetera. And, for those Japanese players that are recruited out of university to come and work for these companies, what a great opportunity. They've got that ability to learn a corporate lifestyle in a cushioned environment. Would that be fair to say? And also be a professional rugby player. So that transition piece that as Kiwis or Irish or other players from around the world, it's not such a steep cliff. Just
massive.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fascinating system.
Fascinating. Sorry, Glenn.
No, I was going to say, I think it's definitely a way forward. And look, we all know how tough it is when you finish playing. And, everyone goes through it, that you might have a 10-year professional rugby career, but you're definitely going to need to have a second career.
Yeah, for sure.
And when you look at, our peer groups that are working and start off in an organisation at 22, they're 10 years ahead of us.
Yeah. It's a genius idea as well, not just from the player, from the company. I remember when I was a kid, I remember watching Toshiba came over on a tour, and they came armed with TVs, and when they were playing, and they were dishing out TVs. So if you're looking at it from, number one, it promotes the brand of the company. Number two, they're engaging the community. Number three, they've got ready-made people that they can recruit both from the community and players. It's like a masterstroke. If you look at I know it's a different circumstance now, but if you look at Tony Rowe at Exeter Chiefs, he built his company around sponsoring Exeter Chiefs, the branding and everything. I think that's where perhaps rugby's losing his kind of engagement with the community in the UK about how they deal with sponsors.
Yeah, I think there's room for it. I totally agree with this. There's plenty of room for it.
Yeah.
You look at even in the potted history of the past of, I'm trying to think, guys would have jobs that got a job in the city. If they went to a London club, got a job in the city, and all of a sudden away they went. And there was room for both. And I think there's still definitely room for both. Most of the companies in Japanese rugby are consumer facing. So you talk about Toshiba with televisions and consumer electronics. They do other stuff as well. Panasonic, similarly, consumer electronics. Honda, cars. We have cars, but we also make ships and stuff. And not everyone's going to buy a ship, but the reality is that Suntory is one of the biggest brewing companies and beverage companies in the country. So they're all trying to push their products out. When you look at guys going to work for Toyota, who are a massive organisation, and they go in there on a company employee position, well, when they finish as a player, they can then go and probably work in a dealership anywhere in the country. So they might be able to go back to where they were from and, become a car salesman or work in the dealership doing something. So I think that the chance to give skills for the long term, I think rugby can still do that, because that's really what rugby used to be, that sort of network that you went to a club and turned up as a Kiwi from the middle of nowhere and met someone who says, "Oh, you need some work? Yeah, I'll come with me. I'll come and learn how to do this." And next thing you're working in recruitment and you're like, I don't know about recruitment. What I do now, I was taught it. And that's, I think, what we can, it'd be great to see more of that happening in the game globally.
Well, I think you've
Yeah.
also got
Yeah.
a lot more balance there. If you've got your players that are off doing, whether they're studying, whether they're working in a company like you've got in Japan, whether they're learning a trade or whatever, if they're spending their day off doing something productively, or, there's plenty of hours in the day, as a professional player, they could be doing something. They're getting that, able to switch off from the tasks that they're doing, and I think then become back more refreshed and excited, as we all did back in the day when we turn up, 2 or 3 nights a week. You're excited to do the fun stuff, which is playing rugby. And as you say there, there's still a great role and a lesson there to be learned, I think, for all clubs all around the world there. Help develop the person and the skills they've got makes them a better rugby player come Saturday.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that motivation thing is massive, because you're motivated for both things. So when you've done your rugby, you've expended your energy, you've tired yourself out for that 2-hour session that we used to get flogged on a Monday night or a Tuesday night. And then in the morning, you're back at the office Wednesday. You actually feel good about I'm back into this now. And I think that you talk about the fluctuation, the motivation for each thing. You're motivated maximally, but in different areas.
Yeah.
And I think that's good for your brain.
100%. Couldn't agree more.
And also, I was going to say as well, from a sponsorship side, if ever a sponsor wants to get involved in sport, they should look at a Japanese model, because it's constant engagement with the community. They don't have to spend. I know companies that spend fortunes on like hiring influencers, and it'd be cheaper to buy a rugby club than what they spend, and they get constant engagement, and it's great for the community. Where could they possibly go wrong? So any sponsors out there that are differing, have a look.
Get involved.
Get involved.
Yeah. Well, you look at the airtime, the broadcast, is obviously massive. The television rights get sent everywhere, but you've got all the logos over everything. So when you actually cut up the airtime that they get, and actually how much it would cost to have that airtime, it's pretty cheap, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's great value. The brands are very strong here. The company brands are, some of the leading brands in the world. It's pretty exciting.
So as we talked about, you've coached and played all around the world. When you look back at each of those roles that you've had in those different environments, what's one leadership lesson that stayed constant with you, regardless of country, competition, or resource?
So a foundation for me, it's always been around the behaviours. So something so simple as being on time. Be on time to make a difference. That's the first thing. So if I look at the way it's evolved for me, it's about making the most out of every single day that you've got. So when you're wanting to sort of earn respect and credibility, I think you've got to have some behavioural standards that you adhere to. So I think you can be a chameleon of personalities in terms of trying to find a way of working with everyone, but I think you've got to put that in a box of values. There's got to be some fairly clearly defined parameters as to what's acceptable and what's not. And for me, I've always been really careful around acceptable behaviour and understanding that there are guidelines and lines. And for me, just starting with something so simple as being on time, because that shows respect for the people you're with and shows that you're actually committed to being a part of something. I think that's the first thing I would start with. So that for me has always been a foundation. I did used to say, be on time and bring me a coffee. That was how I found it. So I'd add a little bit of the be on time was the message, but I'm going to need a coffee. So I'd add a little bit to that, but simple things around behaviours, they'll generate respect. And I think with respect, as we all know, it takes a long time to build it, but you can lose it in a heartbeat. And, if you're there and someone hasn't given you the respect to simply turn up at the right time, that's not a good place to be, I don't think.
No, 100%. Couldn't agree more. And did you end up with, when you got the best environments there that brought into your message, 30 coffees being delivered ahead of the training session?
A lot of coffee. Yeah, it's I reckon coaches probably drink more coffee than any other industry in the world, and we're blessed that we've got a wonderful sponsor in All Press Coffee from New Zealand who do our coffee here at work, and they've put in some very nice machines. So coffee makes the rugby world go round. I
Yes,
think.
it does.
The serious thing around the coffee is the coffee chat.
Mm-hmm.
Like having a coffee is a chance for you to find out something about someone, and it'll defuse. You'll learn something, and any chance for me to have a coffee with someone, I'm there.
Yeah,
Great advice.
It's probably a bit different to the old hut at Sunbury, where Macca used to put on the kettle.
Yeah, well, yes. Was there even a kettle in there? I can't remember.
I don't know. I never got invited in for a coffee.
No.
Did you not?
Never. Only to get told off. So
yeah, that's what we're all told before.
Yeah. So if you stripped everything back, what do you believe a leader actually has to deliver every single day for a team to perform?
So there's got to be a level of consistency. You have to have a consistency that they can rely on, because if you're fluctuating, that's very hard for others to understand where you're trying to be. So having that consistency for me is critical. But there's a couple of things that I've used over my time. There's two management theories which I keep testing that they're still relevant. So the first one is path goal theory, which Robert House brought out. It's about how you effectively lead people to their objective via a path, and whether you're going to be directive around giving them instructions, or supportive around their well-being, or participate, inviting them in to help with the decision and help with the direction, or making it achievement orientated. So there's something on it for them that motivates them. Finding which one of those things help those individuals get to the goal. So it's quite straightforward. And the other one was a guy named Peter Senge, is an American management leader, and he wrote a book called The Fifth Discipline, which was about systems thinking. And it actually hooked all the four other parts that he had, which was having a shared vision, having mental models, which as an individual you can think about how you see the world, hold that up to account, have it challenged. You might modify a little bit of that. Personal mastery, so know your thing and know it really, really well. And team learning, so learning as a group. And then when you put it all into a system, so rugby, I believe, is a system. So we've played the game with 15 players, barring yellow cards, red cards. So we'll just call it 15. You can't do anything on your own. So if you guys think about the scrum, there's a system being built in order for 8 players to cohesively achieve something. If you think about a defensive system, everyone has a role within the system. The attacking system allows people to use their skill sets to provide and create space for someone to move the ball forward. So I continually go back to those two sort of, I call them coat peak theories in my experience. And I use those in the MBA I did back in, gosh, it was a long time ago now, but that allows me to just keep checking whether or not those things are still relevant. Are they static or have they evolved? Are they still here? And I check on those a lot just to make sure that I'm still heading in the right path.
Very good. So we're into the fun part of the conversation, the quick fire round. Don't overthink it. 6 questions.
Okay.
6 simple answers. First things that come to your mind. One word that defines great leadership.
Care.
Answer.
Got to care.
The best coach or leader you work with, and what made them exceptional.
A player or a coach?
Well, both.
Yeah, let's have both. That'd be interesting.
Okay. So I worked with the captain of Canterbury, was a guy named Luke Whitelock, who is a phenomenal leader. And he's from a generational dynasty. The brothers are all fabulous players, but Luke is a captain, phenomenal, and really just clear, concise, great at what he did, played his role really well, but he led that team to a title and multiple titles. He's a serial captain that won. So he was brilliant, and I still check in on Luke all the time. He's playing for Pau at the moment, actually in France. Coach, I guess the influences for me, there's 3, and I'm gonna you know one of them. There's Dick.
Mm-hmm.
So Dick Best, Brendan Venter,
Mm-hmm.
and Wayne Smith. You put those 3 as 3 different types of people. So Dick very clearly was in charge and gave direction, very clear. Mm-hmm. Brendan was tactically outstanding and motivationally on a different level. He took a group from one year to the next, and we ended up winning the pageant trophy with Brendan as a player coach. But
Mm-hmm.
his way was something different. Wayne Smith's technical ability as a coach was outstanding. He coached me when I was a 15-year-old. So those guys all influenced me in a different way. But if I put the three of them together, there's a lot of parts of those guys that I really looked up to.
That's quite the trifecta there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit hell of a dinner party, that
Yes,
one.
absolutely. Yeah.
I'd have nightmares on a cross between Dick Best and Brendan Venter.
Well, the two of them, because Dick actually coached Brendan as well, because he
we were there,
played under Dick. So
We were there when-
that's your thing. There you go.
Yeah.
When Brendan
There you go.
joined.
But the other thing, I'd probably be remiss of me to not also mention that the time at Nottingham, Steve Hansen, phenomenal for me, and I've known Steve a long time. Steve was a policeman in Christchurch with my father, but he gave me so much time in and around me learning how to coach. And I see he's in Japan coaching here now, and just an enormous amount of respect. He really gave me so much time when I was a young coach coming through to help me understand this thing and learn about it. And I don't think you've ever fully finished. He's still a great coach, and he's still young at heart, but my goodness, the amount of time he gave me was really, really helpful.
Fantastic.
That's so good to hear.
Yeah.
When you hear stories like that. Amazing.
Hardest call you've ever made as a head coach?
Oh, the hard ones are always when you're releasing people. When you're saying, I'm sorry, you're not staying, and here's why. That's just horrible, because inherently you're always building relationships with people. So it's a far tougher message, obviously, for the person receiving, because they've got to go away and deal with something that's changing dramatically. But it's just awful to have to go through it. You can use empathy. You have to find a way of delivering a message, but still caring. That's the toughest thing you ever have to do, is that.
For sure. One behaviour you wish every business leader adopted from elite sport?
Intensity, the intensity of a working week. And I just look at how we drive our intensity from Monday. I talked about it earlier. If Monday's not nailed, Tuesday won't work. And it's all just this knock-on effect to Saturday and the performance, and then you go again. But that intensity that we're able to work at, and it's pressure, we have that sort of, I guess, a shortened period, which is a season. It's not a 12-month period, but I think that intensity of work is something that we do pretty well in professional sport that I think could transfer across.
I agree.
Yeah. I'm sorry these are not very fun questions, but Ben,
No, they're
sorry,
great.
Glenn, I wrote
Making
them.
me think.
No, but I was actually going to say about like intensity. How do you think you could bring that into the business?
I think it's
world?
objectifying and making sure that if you set the day up right, and I've been in offices in the past where you sort of get in the morning and everyone's have a coffee and have a talk about the week. There's lots of social sort of stuff going on, whereas actually there are things that you can get on with around maximizing the period of time that you're at work. I genuinely think you can get more out of the day rather than being present. I think there's more to it, and making sure that you've connected with all the people that you need to work with so that ideas are growing. And I think if you can drive yourself to be motivated each day to get the most out of every day rather than just exist and be present, I think you can change a lot in a very short space of time.
I also think you touched upon it earlier when you mentioned theming. I think businesses could really take a lot out of that, getting
100%.
people on the journey and,
Oh, a metaphor, telling a story. It's always exciting. And I think this is one thing when you go into companies from professional sport is you're actually telling stories about what you do.
Yeah. And
you see how people are really interested and excited about something different. But actually, imagine if you did that every day and told a story about Steve Redgrave or someone like that and the journey he went through to win all the golds and the pain and the heartache and the sacrifice and all that stuff, and said, right, this week we're going to go through Steve's medals from the pair that he first won right the way through to the final one, which we probably all watched and just were like, just win it. Come on. If you told that story through a week, you probably, did he get 5 golds? Maybe there's 5 days.
Yeah.
Maybe he got 5 or 6. Tell the story around that. I think found that when you go into those environments and you're just talking about what you do, people are genuinely quite energized to hear about it. So I think you can make that something different every day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny you say that, going slightly off topic there, but Sir Steve Redgrave, when Sir Clive Woodward was coaching London Irish, he brought him down and did exactly that. And I'd never heard of the guy, I'd never watched rowing, never had any interest rowing, but what an incredible story. And I wasn't alone in the room there. Probably everybody had the same feeling, just we got caught up with it and it's like, hey, you know, don't want to play rugby anymore. I want to row. You know, luckily that feeling dissipated pretty quick because I'd be an awful rower. But you know, it was so
the genetics weren't there, Fitzy, for rowing.
No, exactly. Yeah, I'm built for comfort, not endurance. But it was so incredible. So yeah, no, and it had his box of gold medals. I think he'd won 3 at that point, 3 consecutive ones, and went on to win another couple. But incredible man.
But I think there's also like the business stories, like entrepreneurial stories of people who started companies up and away they went. And I guess Branson's got some wonderful stories around, you know, when he started Virgin Airways, if they got bumped off the flight, so he bought the plane and sold tickets and said, now I've chartered the plane, we're off. There it is. Those are great stories.
Yeah.
And I think that sport, business, you know, academic stories, there's plenty of things to inspire people to make them maybe. And I think the thing about the theming for me is that if 80 to 90% of your week is relatively repetitive around the tasks you have to sort of consistently do so that you can achieve something at the end, if you can make the group think 80% of the week about the theme whilst they're doing this, it sort of keeps it fresh.
Yeah.
It takes their mind off that part and they're talking about something different.
No, couldn't agree more.
And too many companies, what they forget is like these sort of things, stories, it creates memories and nostalgia. And those are the things that people will remember about teams. You know, you speak to, you know, can you remember results when you played at London Irish? Probably only the real big ones, but what you do remember is the memories. And that's...
Yeah. Oh, the people.
Yeah.
Gee whiz.
Yeah. And companies just don't do that enough, I think. They neglect that aspect.
Well, it's interesting that the thing that the team working thing that we get through. So if you think about the game of rugby, which is mentally, physically, and emotionally challenging, so it's a different sort of a field. In the workplace, that can be sort of mentally really challenging. It can still be emotionally challenging because you know you're attached to a sale or a pitch or a project going well and being received well. But there is also a physical tax because you physically have to be in the room and you've got to be motivated physically well enough so that you can work. And some jobs are physical without a shadow of a doubt. You know, plumbing, physical job. You know, there's plenty of things that can be attuned in that you could actually focus on, that you can almost turn it into a sport, into a team. And I think that's something that we do naturally because of what we have to do. But I think teams can be built that can create that level of energy that can help you achieve an objective.
Next question. If you could relive one moment from your coaching career just for the feeling, which one are you choosing?
Yeah. Okay. The one I'm choosing was Nottingham against Leeds, and we lost a semi-final in the 10th minute of overtime. And we thought we'd got it, and then we just didn't. And it has stayed with me forever because what it taught me was it's never over, and don't expect it's going to be over. So it's a funny one because you could talk about some of the other successes and the fun we had after winning the Power Gen or winning a trophy with Canterbury, which are totally different feelings. But that one was one that stayed with me because it hurt so much that at the last sort of 10 seconds, and I thought that the group deserved it, but we didn't get it. And actually that's one thing that stayed with me, and I've always used that game as a motivation. And actually my son, who's 21 next week, he would have been about 4 when that happened. He's never forgotten it.
Wow.
Because it's just that memory. But yeah, I find it's not one of those sort of euphoria, we won a trophy, those things, because I sometimes found there was probably a bit more relief after that than euphoria. But I did find that Leeds semi-final, you know, not getting that result in the last 10 seconds after that much overtime or injury time, it stayed with me, and I've used it as motivation ever since.
What about as a player, Glenn?
As a player,
Best moment?
gosh, as a player,
Doing line
one
out
memory
sessions
that
with Dick Best?
yeah, line out sessions with Bestie when we did 250s ad nauseum. There's tons of those. I reckon that the first game I played for London Irish, I'll never forget. And I went on for the last 15 minutes at Franklin's Gardens away. And at that stage, I guess you just don't know whether you're up to it. And you're like, am I going to be okay? And, they had Gary Pagel was playing, and I think Bruze, the big French lock, was playing. And, there's some Tim Rhonda, some pretty good guys playing in that team. And next minute you're on the field and she's packed. And right now I've got to get on with my job, and can I do this? And actually prove to myself in that sort of 15 minutes that Bestie put me on that I wanted more of it, and never forgot it. So it's one of those.
Remarkably humble response, Glenn.
Yeah, very good. I suspect that Moo knows something that I don't know with this question, so I'll ask it. London Irish, who had the worst chat, and why was it definitely one of the forwards?
It's always one of the forwards, you know that. So the team, so Neil Hatley, who a good mate of mine, he's Japan coach now. The banter we had was absolutely caustic and very funny, and it just was continuous. But the guy that I reckon, funniest guy, James Cockle. So Jimmy Cockle was hilarious.
We know his brother really well.
Yeah, there you go, Steve. Yeah, there. Like Jimmy was just of a different level, and the banter and just continuous. So it is always one of the forwards, but there's some great characters in that London Irish team. Gee whiz, we had some fun, and some of the backs would chime in every now and then, but
they didn't get
for the most part, not really. But Jimmy, I would say, was at the centre of a lot of the fun that we had. We also had Chris Sheesby in the team, who had come from Quins, and the big guy was, again, a very funny, humorous, very generous man, lovely fella, but just came from a different part of the world to the rest of us. So, we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun with those guys.
Brilliant. Well, look, Glenn, this has been outstanding. Sharp, honest, packed with insights for anyone trying to build culture, lead under pressure, or adapt in a fast-changing environments. Been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Thank you for joining us on The Business End.
Oh, thanks, fellas. It's been a blast, and nice to see you. And congratulations on the podcast. It's going really, really well. So I'll keep listening in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn.
Appreciate
Lovely to speak.
Thank you.